Okay, I just want to recap and double down on this, as this could stir up a bit of flack. I can almost hear the arguments. But no, I want to make this point. The last time around, we were taking a look at 212, which is an issue from my childhood, actually. Um, from, November, December-ish of 1980. And what we have on the cover here is uh, January, right here as the month, and 1980 as the year. But it is, in fact, not a January 1980 issue. Okay? And that's important to remember. Some people may not know this, but a lot do. A lot of people do know that back in the day, these issues were dated in the month. The month was 3 months ahead of the actual newsstand time. You know, so something that would land on the shelf, you know, in say October, November of 1980 would have a January month tack to it, and which would be January 1981. It would the month is 3 months ahead of the actual display beginnings. The January represents the takedown point, when it's the display date. When that date comes up, the book comes off the shelf. That's the idea there. But while it's in 1980 and not 81, they present on the cover a 1980. Now, some people, when they're doing presentations of flip throughs or looking at old comics, this kind of thing, let's take a look, or let's do some comic book history, and they're trying to present the issues. What they sometimes do is simply look on the cover, and that's all they do. So they'd look here and say January 1980, which would be incorrect. This is, in fact, this January is conducive with 1981. Okay, it's not a January 1980 issue, and it's what I was trying to point out is that it's very important to remember that when you see a January, February, or March display date, it's usually not conducive to the date you can see printed here on the side. Yeah, it's usually not conducive to that 1980. And why take my word for it? Okay, here's the point. If you want to ever prove that, I'm going to show you two ways we can do that. Actually, I have an extra aid to show that as well. That's why I'm returning to this subject in this episode. See, that January date, the month of January, stipulated there. If you look here in the indicia, right? The indicia down here at the bottom of the page shows the publisher, addresses of Marvel Comics, etc. Well, you'll see that it says number 212, January, and yes, 1981, rather than 1980 on the cover. So that's your first giveaway. So it's real simple. January, February, March are usually not conducive to the display year on the page. Okay? And there's a reason for that. It has something to do with, I don't know. I was going to say false advertising, but that's not it exactly. I wouldn't call it advertising. So the point is not only to remember that these the months indicated on the cover are 3 months ahead of when the mag actually arrives on the stands and stays there for that 3 month period or whatever. But not only that, okay, for those people that are doing flip throughs and stuff, not only that, but it's also important that the first 3 months of any given year, January, February, and March, are not conducive to the date. I'm starting to repeat myself, but, and for some of you who might not buy that and want to argue the point, I want to use another reference to drive the point home. 1 second. Okay. What you're looking at here is something that came out around 1985. I remember these. And I only collected up to the 9th issue, which just happens to support what I'm trying to demonstrate here. I'm not sure how far the index went, what number it went up to. This is a thing from the past, but basically this is the Amazing Spider-Man Index, right? December 9th issue. So you're talking, right, November. Probably came out September, just at the end of the summer, that sort of thing. But anywho, the point here to make is that, 1 second here, what you have in here are pictures of the issues, right? You see the picture of the issue there. 1 sec, folks, let me make an adjustment here. Which have write-ups, you know, for each issue posted, right? Including, which is great, I think, is they'll list not only the credits, right? Oh, where did that go now? Do. Bear with me here, folks. Yeah, not only the interior credits, but they also show, you know, the cover credits. See, most of the time, well, a lot of the time, especially during the Bronze era, you would find the artist and sometimes the inker, you know, their signatures on the cover art, but not always. But that's the great thing about these indexes. They list that too. For example, this issue 196 with Peter Parker standing at the grave of Aunt May, who was supposedly dead at the time. That was the Wolfman run, Wolfman Keith Pollard run. Great stuff. But it says here that it was Keith Pollard and Frank Giacoia doing the cover. So that's really great. But what's also great is that you get the actual date that the issue represents. So this would be September 79, right? So if we page along back here a bit, let me go. Let's see what we got here. That's 14. Okay, that's going too far. And 13. And there's our boy there. Okay, there's our boy there. Let me just scoop that under there. Bring that across. So, yeah, there's our boy there. I'm gonna push that further across. Give me a second here. So, yeah, if you look, right, let's see, how are we going to do this? If we look right down here, well, here's the cover, of course, right, of 212. And with the same, it'll say 212, and over there, 1980 in the character block, right? But if we look in the write-up, just above the cover credits, well, right away, it tells you the number, and it's January. It says right there, 1981, which is, you know, conducive with the indicia, right? With that representation. So those are the actual numbers, right? You know, so argue away, but that's how it is. So basically, when you're doing your presentations, and there's a few guys that keep doing this, and they're making a grave mistake when they're talking about January, February, March issues. They're stating the wrong year. They just are. And, you know, the argument will come up, well, just look on the cover. It says so right there. Well, then it's just one of those points. They just don't understand how distribution and display dates were happening and working at that time. It's really simple once you grasp it, but I just thought I'd use that other reference to eliminate any argument there. Now, also, in that last episode, we ran through the whole Hydro Man introduction thing with Sandman, where they ended up merging and becoming this thing, which Denny O'Neil wrote in with the well, he stitched in the a little well, he paid homage to the King Kong movie, and I remember I mentioned that I thought, well, this looks like a Frank Miller cover, but I couldn't quite confirm that kind of thing. Well, one of the things I could mention is that, yeah, the very next issue of 219 was a Frank Miller copy, and you know that was okay. The date there is August, right? August 81, and here we go. We got Peter Parker 2 with the July 81 issue, and that was also a Frank Miller cover. And folks, I can honestly tell you, I remember getting this one off the stand, actually off of Spinner Rack, right? And this one here, I did not get off a Spinner Rack. I got it in a 50-cent bin or something years ago. But the thing I would say about them that I do remember, in fact, I remember this particular issue itself. I wasn't quite 11 years old. I was still 10 years old, about to go on 11. And I remember looking at this and noticing the difference. And I got to tell you, at that time, as a kid, I was looking at this kind of art, and the word in the back that came up in the back of my head was no, yuck, don't like it. I'm just saying I didn't like things like I didn't quite like the thing like the wonky blotchy kind of ink work and stuff like that. So probably if I was introduced to Klaus Janson at that time, I wouldn't have liked it much. But, then again, at that time, to me, Kirby was kind of absurd. I didn't like it at all, right? I think that was sort of like an education that would soon come. And I didn't know this was Frank Miller. My first introduction, I think, to Frank Miller, to paying attention to books that I actually liked, was stuff that was like inked by Rubinstein. Rubinstein at the time, the Wolverine series that would soon come, that would soon follow. And I dug that, and later I'd come to discover the Daredevil stuff as well, right? And there were a lot of great things to come from Miller at the time, but at that time, I was just like, I was kind of like, yuck, what is that? I remember it distinctly. It just didn't, I was like, I don't want my covers to look, and in these dead colors, too. I hated them. I was like, this purple and then this pastel-y, what is this, right? And the rough etching of the Spider-Man figure and stuff. It's like, I understood there was a lot of experimentation going on at the time with Frank, and some of the stuff he came up with was just fantastic. With a lot of his, teaming up with, with Jansen and with Lynn Varley and various others, it would be just great. But at the time, I was like, blech, didn't like it at all. But it's just funny how that works. The way a child sees things, the way a kid sees things. I guess, it all depends on when you were born, too. I suppose if I was that age about 10 to 12, even 14 years before that, say, during the Kirby Lee period in the 60s, by the mid 60s or whatever, I would have had a different opinion of Kirby. But that opinion did change. It's just at the time, I would look at the reprints I was picking up at that time, the reprint Fantastic Four and and then there was the other, some of the DC stuff and the Internals and the, I don't know, just some of the wonky stuff I was seeing at the time. In 79 and 80, I was like, bleh, this guy can't draw. This looks so goofy, and the square fingertips. And, well, the rest. But later I would learn that when I really looked at it, the storytelling was just amazing, actually. That no one could really, well, a lot of people would find it hard to beat him. I'll put it that way. And it was just, in a way, just almost like a genius when it came to comics. He could really tell a story, and the energy and intention it had didn't have much to do with what I was trying to do at the time. See, by the time I got a hold of Buscema's How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, I was, I was just not interested in that. And, later seeing things like the Zek work, the Zek and Jean Day work in Masters of Kung Fu, and later Jean Day's total work on Masters of Kung Fu, and the movie adaptations of Blade Runner and things like that. I could see that there was comic book art out there, and plus the Keith Pollard that I was being bombarded with, and Ross Andrew and John Byrne on the Marvel Team Up stuff as well. That's where I wanted to be. I didn't, this Kirby guy, what? Get it, that was something I'd have to grow into. But that's the way it was, though. This, though, I was like, bleh, just didn't like it at all. No offense to Frank. There's a lot of great stuff he went on to do. Now, from time to time, you've heard me mention the Wolfman Keith Pollard run on Spider-Man, which was really inspirational. I remember making a trade for some Star Wars action figures or something for a small stack of, say, like 14 issues from about 190 to about 204 or something like that of the Wolfman run and stuff. And by the time I got to looking at 197 with that Kingpin beat 'em up issue, I thought that this stuff is just great. Keith Pollard became my go-to guy. And Wolfman, I love those stories, especially like the J. Jonah Jameson one where he's linked up with Spidey, with the handcuffs with the bomb on it. And, Kingpin thing was great, one of my favorites. I like the Mysterio stuff too, this and that. Of course, the 200th issue. But at that time, and beginning in around 1978, Wolfman had already come up with something with his co-creators called The Spider-Woman. Okay, now this is a reprint. This is a modern reprint, as you can see by the price there, right? But scooped it up. It's the #1 issue, which all takes place in England and blah blah blah. Well, I'll just say this about that. Not everything was golden, Wolfman. Yeah, she didn't take off. She was there for a bit, and as a memory, she's seriously implanted from this Gen X kid's childhood. I remember seeing her there, but not being too crazy or interested. But yeah, I'd scoop up a few issues here and there. But the reason I bring this up is that this reprint is like a total reprint, so that it's accurate. So in the sense that the ads that you find in this modern reprint are the same ads that you found in the original book. So that also means that with Star Wars stuff and the bodybuilding stuff, It also means that the letters section in the Marvel bullpen is the same as that, that issue back in '78. Now, why I mention it is because I mentioned that again before, as I so often like to do, the Marvel How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way book. Well, it just so happens that I was flipping through this reprint, and no, as a kid, I didn't really read the bullpen stuff. I'd see all that fine print, and my eyes would just cross over. I'm like, where's my pencil? I want to draw these things, right? And it wouldn't even be until I got to that 212 Spidey issue where I actually started reading the stuff. But I decided to go back and look at this in Stan's soapbox because, as it turns out, there's the announcement of that book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, where Stan's, both announcing and promoting, right? This book that was to hit the shelf in our library that would start such a commotion amongst the young artists there in elementary school. But there's the back cover, right? But yeah, I came across this article and I thought, isn't that something? That's interesting. So I thought I'd give it a read. It's not very long, but it was definitely an important announcement. I knew it was around 78, late 78, as I've mentioned before. I started to doubt that as I heard some people mentioning it a lot earlier. But no, here it is. In 78, in the bullpen bulletins of that month, and in this issue of The Spider-Woman, it reads as such. Stan Soapbox, this is it. The world-shaking announcement you've been waiting for. How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way by Stan Lee and John Buscema. That's the cover. Now, if you ever wanted to draw your own comic strip, or even if you just wanted to learn the inside story of how it's done, here's where you get your wish. Even as you read these... get your wish. Even as you read these wondrous words with your senses reeling, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way is going on sale throughout the nation. It's the only book of its kind which specializes exclusively in showing you how to draw superhero comics, and it shows you how to do it the Marvel style. Designed and illustrated by Big John Buscema. It's a visual delight which will dazzle your eyes while it answers virtually any question you could ever dream up about drawing your own comic strip. As for the text, it's written by yours truly, and don't let that turn you off. You'll be so busy drooling over the illustrations. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, God, I remember that. The effect that book had. Anyway, you'll be so busy drooling over the illustrations that not even my little literary lunacy will bother you. And now, here's the best part. You can get your happy little hands on How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Listen to this, for only $8.95 a copy. I wonder if that was a hard copy for $8.95 back in the day there, 78. But anyway, but please, don't embarrass us with your tearful expressions of undying gratitude. That's what I do now. Anyway, just promise one thing. After you've read the book, published by good old Simon & Schuster and on sale at better bookstores everywhere, and after you've learned our secrets and become the artist you've always longed to be, promise you won't go to work for our competition. And now, as you prepare for the mad dash to your neighborhood bookstore, I'll head for the hills before you get the idea that I'm trying to sell you something. Or as the noble Romans might have put it, in hoc signo vinces. Excelsior, Stan, right? So there it was. There was the announcement. I thought, that's the coolest thing ever. Yeah, I think by now, if anyone has happened to look at some of my other videos in the On the Board series or the Inking Thinking series, that sort of thing, you don't have to wonder about how I felt about this book and the impact it had on me, and probably a lot of, well, I remember it obviously affected a lot of the other kids at the time because we'd wrestle for it. You could, you know, seeing it on the shelf or in the library trolley, you had to grab it fast because someone always had it, and they'd place it right on their desk, right, for everyone to see, and so envious. As I've said before, I'd get it home. Oh yeah, I'd get it home and I just, you know, go through it, all, you know, picture after picture, fascinated by all the graphite work, right? Because after seeing comics for so long the way they were, I didn't make that connection that, you know, at one point these images were, you know, first hit the paper as graphite, and that just blew my mind. Especially, I remember these pictures, the effect they had. This one of Cap, for example, of Doom, you know, Doctor Doom there, and etc. Power Man, Nick Fury. Oh boy! But chapter after chapter, it would tell you the techniques, the tools used. Chapters on perspective, the figure, action. How to draw a page, different points of view, the camera eye, all these things. And it was just fascinating. And yeah, so we wrestled to get a hold of it. The impact was, it was just incredible. But I'm not so sure how, you know, I suppose how effective this book was in teaching kids how to draw. I guess it's going to vary from one kid to another, but I know it had an impact on me and quite a few of the other kids that I was going to school with at the time. Well, anyway, just wanted to touch upon those few issues to wrap up that one question about the indicia and the display dates on Bronze era comics back in the day for those Gen X childhood enthusiasts that are presenting their works or doing flip throughs and that sort of thing. You want to get that right, all right? Don't just go by the cover. You can go by the cover year and month and like just as they are, unless you're talking about January, February, March. Just keep that in mind. You'll always find the actual date that the month displayed is conducive with in the indicia. That's the point. And the Marvl indexes will also, of course, if you have those, you can go back and check it out. There's probably other means to find out exact dates and cover art and all that too, but I'm just glad I picked those up back in the day. Well, thanks for stopping by, and yeah, I don't know. Keep up the enthusiasm.